Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're diving into this legal battle. It's pretty fascinating, honestly. It really gets to the core of presidential power. And, you guys sent us these excerpts, really fascinating stuff from this court filing.
Oh, yeah, the motion from special counsel Jack Smith.
Right, exactly. Jack Smith. And it's all about, well, we're going to be breaking it down, but it's about former President Trump's actions after the 2020 election.
Yeah, and this one, it's a biggie.
Yeah.
Not your average legal case, let me tell you. This document, this one could seriously change how we see the presidency forever.
No kid. Okay, so should we let's just dive right in. The document itself, I gotta say, it's dense. Like, seriously, it's like reading a legal textbook.
Oh, tell me about it.
But the main point, the core argument, is actually pretty straightforward. They're saying former President Trump, he should be held accountable for what he did, but here's the thing. As a private citizen to try and overturn the election, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right?
Bold is an understatement. And the reason it's so important, so groundbreaking, is because of this line the prosecution's drawing. They're separating, very deliberately, Trump's actions as a candidate, fighting to get reelected, from his actual official duties as president of the United States.
So it's like they're saying he was wearing two hats at the time, the candidate hat and the president hat. And the things they're focused on, the actions, fall under the candidate category.
You got it. And they are not mincing words about those actions either. The motion actually uses the term, get this, private criminal scheme, to describe Trump's efforts. Basically, they're saying he was acting like any other candidate in that position would. Just, oh, by the way, this particular candidate also happened to be the sitting president.
Wow. Private criminal scheme. Those are fighting words. But okay, what evidence are they using to back that up? What did Trump actually do that makes them think he was acting as a private citizen?
Well, the motion, it gets into the nitty-gritty of Trump's conversations, interactions, really, with various state officials after the election. And here's what's interesting. He only reached out to, and this is according to the document, but it seems he only reached out to officials from his own party, specifically in states that he lost. There's no record of him contacting officials who could have said, yeah, that's right, or nope, you're wrong about his claims. Kind of strange behavior for a sitting president, don't you think?
Yeah, it does seem a little sus. I mean, if you were really worried about the election's integrity as the president, you'd think you'd want the full story, right? Both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the prosecution, they're all over this. They say it's a major sign that Trump was acting out of self-interest here, not really acting as the president, in his official capacity. Yeah, you're right about that. It really does make you wonder. And, the prosecution, they're not letting that slide. They're using it, this whole idea, to say, look, this wasn't about being president. This was personal.
Okay, so they're focusing on who he talked to, or really who he didn't talk to. But what about everything else he was saying publicly? I mean, those tweets, come on.
Oh, man, the tweets.
Yeah.
Yeah, those definitely didn't go unnoticed. The motion spends a lot of time, a lot of words breaking those down, especially the ones aimed at Mike Pence. The whole Mike Pence didn't have the courage thing.
Yeah, how could we forget? But the prosecution's saying those weren't just, random thoughts he was tweeting out, right? They're saying those were part of this private criminal scheme.
That's exactly it. They're saying those tweets, they weren't official White House stuff, not official presidential communication. They were, and I'm just paraphrasing here, the desperate cries of a candidate who was about to lose power, grasping at straws.
Wow. It's kind of wild to think about those tweets in that context.
Right. And they even go further, contrasting those personal tweets with the more official at POG S45 account.
Oh, right.
Which, believe it or not, was pretty quiet about the election challenges. It's a clever tactic, actually, to point out how different his messages were depending on which hat he was wearing at the time.
That's a really good point. So basically, they're trying to paint this picture of Trump as this desperate candidate, so desperate to stay in office that he'd do pretty much anything, even if it meant going around his presidential duties and maybe even, messing with the entire democratic process.
That's the narrative they're building, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This document, it goes on to pick apart every single one of Trump's claims about election fraud, point by point, with hard evidence to the contrary. We're talking dead voters, more ballots than voters. They even bring up this example about Santa Claus.
Hold on, Santa Claus. What does Santa Claus have to do with any of this?
It's about signature verification.
Yeah.
They basically said if these machines were as messed up as Trump was claiming, then even someone like Santa Claus, who's obviously not real, wouldn't have been flagged.
Okay, I have to admit, that's a pretty funny way to make their point. It does make those claims seem kind of ridiculous.
Exactly. And that's a key strategy here. They're addressing these outlandish claims head on, shooting them down with evidence. It's like they're taking a wrecking ball to the foundation of Trump's defense, chipping away at his credibility, showing that there's just no proof to back up his claims. And that's not even mentioning his failure to talk to officials who could have actually backed him up.
Right, like if these claims were so legitimate, so true, why didn't he, as the president, take the steps to actually check them out?
It's a strong argument, for sure. But what's really fascinating is how this case goes beyond just the 2020 election. This thing delves into the very heart of presidential power, even quoting guys like Benjamin Franklin about the dangers of giving any president too much authority.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, look, even Ben Franklin was worried about this. But how does quoting historical figures help their case in a modern courtroom?
It adds weight to their argument that this isn't just about one guy's actions. It's about upholding the principles that America's democracy was built on. They're drawing a straight line from what the Founding Fathers were concerned about back then to what's happening right now.
That's a powerful way to frame it. So they're laying out the historical context, breaking down what Trump did and what he said. But how does the whole private citizen argument actually work in this?
Here's where it gets really interesting on the legal side of things. The prosecution's arguing that because Trump was driven by his own ambition, his desire to stay in office, his actions aren't protected by presidential immunity.
Hold on, hold on. For those of us who aren't lawyers, what exactly is presidential immunity and why would it matter here?
Excellent question. Presidential immunity basically acts as a shield for the president, protecting them from certain types of lawsuits while they're in office. The idea is that the president shouldn't be tied up in court all the time while they're trying to, run the country.
Okay, that makes sense. But the prosecution's saying that in this case, because Trump was acting out of self-interest, that protection doesn't apply.
Exactly. They're saying that when a president isn't acting in their official capacity, like when they're making decisions based on personal gain, especially when it comes to something as crucial as an election, they can't just hide behind the presidency to avoid consequences.
So it's like they're saying he stepped outside the bounds of the presidency, crossed a line from public duty into personal interests.
Exactly. And that is a potentially huge argument.
Yeah.
They're basically trying to redraw the lines of presidential power, set a new precedent for holding presidents accountable, even for things they do while in office, if those actions were done as a private citizen.
This is starting to sound less like a court case and more like a legal thriller. But let's get back to the document. They spend a lot of time going into detail about what happened in the weeks after the election, right? What kind of picture are they painting of Trump's actions during that time?
They lay out this meticulous timeline of what they call a multi-pronged effort to overturn the election results. They're saying this went way beyond simply challenging the results through, the proper legal channels. It was about undermining the entire process of counting votes.
So it was more than just a couple of angry tweets then.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a full-blown, organized attempt to make people doubt the election, to make them question if it was even real. Remember all those claims about voting machines being rigged, ballots being counted wrong? The motion connects those directly to Trump's actions during those weeks.
And what they're saying is, by doing that, he wasn't just challenging the results, he was trying to shake people's faith in the entire system.
Exactly. They're saying this wasn't just about one election. It was about causing people to lose trust in the very core of how American democracy works.
That's a bold accusation. But how do they connect what he did to the events of January 6th? That seems like a key part of their argument.
They spent a good chunk of the document drawing a direct line between Trump's rhetoric leading up to the 6th and the violence that happened at the Capitol.
So it's not just about what he did, but also what he said.
Exactly. They highlight everything. Him constantly saying the election was stolen, the rallies he held, even specific tweets and statements he made right before January 6th. They're arguing that these actions directly led to the insurrection.
Wow. And how do they describe Trump's response on that day?
They don't hold back, let's put it that way. They're basically saying that even while the Capitol was under attack, he was still focused on pressuring Mike Pence to mess with the certification process, showing that he didn't really care about the safety of lawmakers and that he only cared about his own political goals.
So they're building this case that his actions both before and on January 6th were those of a desperate candidate, not a president who's supposed to uphold the law and make sure there's a peaceful transition of power.
Exactly. They're making a very clear distinction between how a president is supposed to act in that situation and how Trump actually acted.
It's kind of overwhelming to think about it all. This whole case, it's about so much more than one guy or one election. It's about the future of the presidency itself and the core principles of our democracy.
You got it. This case, it brings up fundamental questions about power, about who has it, about the limits of that power, about what it means to be the president in a democracy, and honestly, it makes you think about whether anyone is really above the law.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around all the potential consequences. What happens if the court actually agrees with the prosecution on this whole private citizen idea? What would that mean for future presidents?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. It's like we're watching a whole new legal landscape being formed right in front of us.
Right.
And what you said about them basically trying to redraw the lines of what's considered official presidential stuff versus private actions, that's huge.
No doubt about it. This is a big deal. We're talking about potentially changing how we understand the Constitution in the 21st century. I mean, it makes you think, what would the Founding Fathers say about all this?
Right. They could never have predicted something like this, could they? It's mind-blowing when you think about it. All this whole case hinging on things like tweets and who texted who. It's a far cry from, like, writing letters and stuff.
Totally different world. But here's the thing that amazes me. Even though the Founding Fathers couldn't have seen this coming, they were smart enough to create a system that could handle it, a system that could adapt and change with the times.
It really shows you how well-designed the Constitution is, how it can still guide us through these totally new legal situations.
Absolutely. But it also forces us to confront some hard truths about the nature of power, how we hold people accountable, and what it really means to live in a democracy.
That's a really good point. It's not just about the legal stuff, it's about the bigger picture.
Exactly. This whole case, regardless of how it turns out, it's a wake-up call. It's making us have these important conversations about the limits of power, the importance of protecting our democracy, and what kind of future we want to build. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, no kidding. And we've only just scratched the surface today. There's so much more to uncover, so many layers to this case.
Oh, absolutely. And as this case goes on, you can bet we'll be following every development closely, every argument, every legal twist and turn, so we can help you make sense of it all. That's what we're here for.
Exactly. To take the complex and make it clear, the confusing, and make it relevant. So until next time, keep those questions coming and keep diving deep with us.